Mr. The Prequels presents the prequels. And Misa back. We're continuing our series now on Jar Jar is the key and how he is the key and what he brings to the story of Star Wars and how Star Wars is a bigger story and more complete because of Jar Jar Binks. Jar Jar is the key. He's the key to this whole thing, actually. He's the funniest character we've ever had in Star Wars, and that's just the way it is. The creator said it, and it is true. Jar Jar is the funniest character we've ever seen in Star Wars. And you might not agree with that. You might not like it. You might not think Jar Jar is funny. You might think he's just only jarring and only annoying. That's your opinion. And you have an opinion. Everybody's got an opinion. You have an opinion. I have an opinion. The creator has an opinion. That's the opinion that we should be mainly looking at, is what did the creator say? And the creator said Jar Jar is the key to this whole thing. He's the key to all of it. And you might disagree with the creator. And you might say, well, Jar Jar's not the key, and Jar Jar's not the funniest of all the characters we've ever seen in Star Wars. And you might not think it rhymes, and you might not think that the creator was right about anything. Especially when the creator said, it's gonna be great. And then Steven said, it's gonna be great. And then the creator said, it's gonna be great. And then Steven said, it's gonna be great. And it was great. And you have episodes 4, 5, and 6, the original trilogy. And I will say that the key to the original trilogy, in that the through line of the original trilogy is Luke Skywalker and his becoming a Jedi, but also Anakin Skywalker is the key to this whole thing and his redemption. And you see it in different ways depending on your point of view, as the Jedi instruct Luke in the original trilogy and as the Jedi instruct in the prequel trilogy. It's all according to a certain point of view. And many of the truths that we hold to be truths are truths from a certain point of view. And then when you look at it like that, it might be a source of frustration, irritation, or confoundment, or confusion. But there's no confusion about whose journey we're following in The New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back and The Return of the Jedi. We're following the journey of Luke Skywalker, but we are seeing as well and following the journey of Anakin Skywalker. And we see this at the beginning in the prequel trilogy. And we see his ultimate redemption as he sacrifices his own life to save his son, destroying himself and the Emperor, thus bringing balance to the Force, according to the creator. And as I have already said, I'm going to say it again. If you don't like what the creator said, then fine. That is your opinion, and it's your prerogative, and it's your choice to say that out loud, using any forum or format that you see fit. But the creator said it, and the creator demonstrated this to us in the films, the books, and the stories that we have now, and that is Star Wars, the original trilogy, episodes 4, 5, and 6. And you see Luke Skywalker, and then you also learn of Leia Organa, who is actually Leia Skywalker, Luke's twin sister. And this is a great mystery, and it's revealed in the original trilogy in The Return of the Jedi. But in the prequel trilogy, we meet all of these people at the very beginning. We meet Anakin, and we meet Luke, and we meet Leia as they're born in Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And so in The Return of the Jedi, we meet Leia Skywalker as Leia Skywalker, previously known to us as Leia Organa. And now she is Leia Skywalker, the twin sister of Luke Skywalker. And the Force is strong with her, as this is confirmed. And the Creator told us this, and showed this to us. And then in the original trilogy, though, we meet these characters, and we meet Anakin Skywalker, and he's a boy. He's a 10-year-old boy, I believe. He's a slave on Tatooine, a planet called Tatooine. And along with his mother. He and his mother are slave. They're owned. They're enslaved, I should say. They're slaves. And they're owned by a parts dealer named Watto. And he's a Tridarian. And he's blue. And he has wings. And he's immune to mind tricks. He's a Tridarian. Mind tricks don't work on him. Only money. Yeah, he's very greedy. And then Anakin and his mother are there on Tatooine. And then we meet Padme Amidala, aka Queen Amidala. There's a whole thing going on there. It's a great reveal, and it's a fantastic movie. The Phantom Menace is one of the greatest movies ever made. Never mind, objectively, is it a good movie? It's freaking amazing, man. The Phantom Menace is possibly, well, in my opinion, top 10 of any movie that has ever been made in Hollywood that's not Hollywood. And we'll get back to that later. But back to this, that Jar Jar is the key. And so in the original trilogy, you see Luke Skywalker, Anakin Skywalker. We meet Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is an old man in this original trilogy. And he's a Jedi Knight, and he says he's the last of his kind, in a manner of speaking. And Luke goes with Obi-Wan on this journey to Alderaan to learn the ways of the Force, and essentially to join in the rebellion against the evil Empire, the Empire. And we see that Luke Skywalker is now the son of Anakin Skywalker. And we learn this in The Empire Strikes Back. And as we've said now, Anakin is redeemed through his son. His son never loses faith. There is still good in you, Father. And Luke Skywalker is the beacon of hope and faith. And now in the prequel trilogy, we meet Anakin, and we meet Queen Amidala, who will become Anakin's love interest, the love of his life, his wife. And they end up having 2 kids, Luke Skywalker and Leia Skywalker. And we meet these people we meet Anakin through Qui-Gon Jinn, the Master Jedi, who's instructing Obi-Wan Kenobi at this time, who, when we first meet Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's an old man in the original trilogy. And then, of course, in the prequel trilogy, he's a young Padawan learner, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And we are witnessing this and how he receives instruction and how the Jedi incorporate into their own lives the politics of their time as well as their own personality, and learn to use the Force, trust in the Force, be mindful of the living Force. And then we also learn about midichlorians, microscopic creatures that live in all living beings, all living creatures. And they are constantly speaking to us, telling us the will of the Force. And when we quiet our minds, we will hear them speaking to us. And then Anakin says, "What are midichlorians?" And Qui-Gon explains this to him. Microscopic creatures that live in all living beings, all living cells. And they're always speaking to us, telling us the will of the Force. And when we quiet our minds, we will hear them speaking to us. And then Anakin says, "I don't understand." And Qui-Gon says, "With time and training, you will." And so we see how Jedi are taking on new Padawan learners and how they instruct Padawan learners, and what the various Jedi do in their philosophy as they live their life and carry out their missions, and the way they use the Force. And Qui-Gon Jinn would seem, on one hand, on the first look, to be very reckless and not very mindful of being careful, safe, or with regard to anyone else's safety. He seems to be very reckless, and he even seems to be a gambling man. He will gamble along with and placing as the stakes someone else's security or someone else's confinement. Seems to be reckless, but this is his approach. Seems to be able to follow his intuition, be mindful of the living Force. His philosophy is, there's always a bigger fish. Don't worry, the Force will guide us. And he manipulates the dice to have a loaded dice in the case of a gambling bet. And then he's just, in many ways, an unethical actor. When he is checking Anakin's blood for the midichlorian count, Anakin is asking him, "What are you doing?" And Qui-Gon says, "Checking your blood for infections." And then as soon as Anakin leaves the space, he sends the blood sample to Obi-Wan and says, "I need you to get a midichlorian count on this." So we see the Jedi are, in some ways, playing with a gray area of ethics, at the very least, to put it in those terms. But then on the other hand, Qui-Gon is a noble warrior, in fact, and very compassionate, and he's kind, and he does seem to be always trying to look out for how a person's going to turn out, even though he plays very reckless with their life and their being at other moments, as he did with Anakin's mom and with Anakin and with everybody on that ship, as he put up essentially everybody's way off that planet so that the boy would win the race. And he manipulated the dice to win the small toss, but Anakin had to win the race, and he had to rely on his intuition and use the Force, which he did. And he did win the race. And then we see, ultimately and eventually, Qui-Gon goes to battle with Darth Maul, And also we're introduced to Darth Sidious, aka the who will later become the Emperor and who is now Senator Palpatine, and who will be at the end of the Phantom Menace Chancellor Palpatine. And then we meet C-3PO and R2-D2, and we know all of these people, C-3PO, these characters rather I should say, these droids, C-3PO and R2-D2 from the original trilogy. And they've always been funny, they've always been used for humor, and to provide the audience with a narrative that is somewhat the every person's point of view, as if you were there with them and you're just having a good time. No reason to be scared, really. You're just having a good time. But the prequels are seat of your pants. I'm talking Flash Gordon Buck Rogers, man. This is seat of your pants, galaxy spanning, solar system hopping. I mean, lightsaber battles, laser swords. You know, that's what everybody wanted, I think, from the Disney movies, is they wanted laser swords and X-Wings, TIE fighters, and trench runs. And when they saw this in the prequels, they didn't get the trench runs, except for the pod race, which is freaking awesome. But the thing we did get is, and I'm glad we got this, and I think the Phantom Menace is my favorite of all the Star Wars films. And I say the Revenge of the Sith is the masterpiece of all the Star Wars movies. And I think the Empire Strikes Back is the best second act of either trilogy. But now getting to this one character that we haven't been yet introduced to in this segment of our series on Jar Jar is the Key, but in the movie, or in the story, in the book, as the creator presents this to us, as George presents this to us, Jar Jar is introduced as soon as the Jedi arrive onto the planet of Naboo. Following their, oh yes, and of course we also meet the Trade Federation, the greedy Trade Federation. And then we meet through this character, Jar Jar Binks, the Gungan race. And these are amphibians that live under the surface of the planet of Naboo. In the water, under the water. And they live in this city, under the water. And Jar Jar Binks encounters these Jedi by coincidence, it seems. He's out there. We later learn, as he will explain this to Padme Amidala, aka Queen Amidala, that he was just having breakfast, and all of a sudden he found himself in the middle of this tumultuous, chaotic event where the Jedi were landing on this planet, hidden in the Trade Federation droid army landing craft that was invading the planet. And the Jedi are running out in front of this machinery that's destroying trees, running over animals, destroying everything in its path. And right in front of Qui-Gon Jinn, as he's running towards the camera, we see Jar Jar. He's just standing there, screaming, "La! La! La!" And Qui-Gon is telling him, "Get out of here, get out of here, get out of the way, get out of here." So we see Jar Jar from one point of view, "Blah! Ah!" And then we see Qui-Gon, "Get out of here, get out of here." That's how we first meet Jar Jar. That's how we first meet Jar Jar. It's just by coincidence. And then later, because of Jar Jar, and then Jar Jar takes them to the city of the Gungans, and where they encounter the bosses, and we learn that Jar Jar is an outcast, and essentially he's been banished from the Gungan society because he's clumsy. He's a bit of, I would say, Gilligan from Gilligan's Island. That's kind of the vibe we're getting here from Jar Jar. He's kind of a Gilligan from Gilligan's Island. But there's more on this in a minute. So Jar Jar comes into the picture. Nobody wants him. The Jedi don't want him. Get out of here. Get out of the way. You almost got us killed. Are you brainless? The first thing Jar Jar says is, wow, you saved me. I owe you my life. And Qui-Gon says, you almost got us killed. Are you brainless? Jar Jar says, well, I speak. And I'm not even going to try to say it like George told Ahmed Best to say it. I'm just going to say it like I'm saying it. Jar Jar says, I speak. And then Qui-Gon says, the ability to speak does not make you intelligent. Now get out of here. Again, get out of here. Leave. Get out of here. This is how we're encountering Jar Jar. The main character cast of this movie is encountering Jar Jar and telling Jar Jar, get out of here. You're in the way. You're causing us problems. Jar Jar is already there because the society he came from was telling him the same thing. Get out of here. Leave. You're in the way. You're clumsy. In essence, you're a Gilligan, essentially. We'll take a look at more of this in a minute. So Jar Jar comes along to encounter this Jedi. Then he meets Padme Amidala, aka Queen Amidala. And this meeting between Jar Jar and Padme brings the Naboo, the people living on the surface of the planet, together with the Gungans, the Gungan race, the race living under the water. And this is the first time that these two societies have been brought together. Even though they've lived in somewhat peace, they've somewhat feared each other, but now Jar Jar has brought them together. Jar Jar brings the Jedi to the Gungan. The Gungan then provide them with a transport through the planet core, through the water, where we learn a little bit more about the Force and a little bit more about Jar Jar. And basically we see that Jar Jar is clumsy. He was banished because he created a lot of problems for basically the boss. And then he says, if I go back there, I will be punished. They're going to do terrible things to me. Terrible things. And he doesn't want that. And you can see it. And Ahmed Best does a great job acting out this role, performing the role of Jar Jar Binks. Ahmed Best, in my opinion, possibly Oscar worthy. Maybe. So, Ahmed Best as Jar Jar Binks. You can see they're already poking him with some kind of an electric shock prod. It doesn't look like it's going to be good. And the Gungans are a highly advanced race. They're very intelligent. They're not susceptible to the Jedi mind trick. This is demonstrated to us. We're seeing this. It's shown to us very clearly. Jar Jar Binks is not stupid. He's not an imbecile. He is articulate, and he does have a lot of insight. And he does point out things to some of the main character cast in their role as characters in this movie. Rather, I should say, rather than main character cast, as to rather say to the main characters, what is going on? Are people going to die? Are you concerned that people are going to die? Many of your people are going to die? And then he talks about his own race. Gungans aren't going down without a fight. We have a grand army. And then he tells Queen Amidala, I think maybe that's why you don't like us. He's very insightful. He speaks almost with the clarity of a child, but he has the mature, the critical thinking skills of an adult. He's very mature in that way. But he's able to ask questions and look at the world as if he was a child. And in this way, I think Jar Jar is the key to this whole thing. Because if you want to get the Phantom Menace, you have got to be a child at heart. If you want to get the Phantom Menace, you're going to have to look at the Phantom Menace as a child would look at this movie. Now, I'm watching it as a child because as soon as the credits roll, opening title crawl, I'm already a 10-year-old again. Believe me. So Jar Jar is the key to this whole thing. He brings Anakin and the Jedi together. He brings Padme and the Naboo and the Gungans together. The Naboo race and the people of Naboo and the Gungan race there of Naboo. And then he brings together all of these characters through this one little accident that he encounters, this coincidental incident where he encounters this Jedi. And then later, he's hungry, so he sees this piece of meat, some kind of a fish or a frog or something hanging on a hook, and he goes and grabs it with his tongue because he loves good food. And then this guy tells him, whoever the vendor is, he says, "Hey, you going to pay for that?" And Jar Jar says, "Pay for that?" He's still got this thing in his mouth. He says, "Pay for that?" He says, "Yeah, it costs 7 whoopee," or whatever it is. And Jar Jar says, "7 whoopee," whoop, and he spits it out. And then this thing flies over and lands in this bowl belonging to this dog. And we know this is a especially dangerous dog called Sebulba, later, according to Anakin. And he comes over and grabs this thing and he says, "Is this yours?" or something like that. "Who did this?" And Jar Jar says, "Who, me?" And then he's got him by the neck. And then Anakin comes over, intervenes, and basically saves Jar Jar from being turned into a pile of orange goo. And then Jar Jar encounters more from the Jedi as to, you're about to get into trouble. To which Jar Jar responds, But I didn't do anything. Misa doing nothing." So Anakin then, through this meeting, seemingly coincidentally, because of Jar Jar, he comes over to save Jar Jar, and then he invites the Jedi and their group with Padme, C-3PO, or rather R2-D2, to the home of Anakin Skywalker, to his home where he and his mother live, where he is building C-3PO. And then, of course, we learn that Anakin has very quick reflexes, and it's because he can see things before they happen, and so on and so forth. And we learn all about the Force, more about the Force. And then Jar Jar becomes an essential part of the story here. He is the key to this whole thing. He brings everybody together. But he's also the key to this whole thing because he's a child. He has the filters of a child, should I say, in that he's unfiltered. But he has the maturity of an adult or a mature person that is able to look at a situation and think about it critically and examine it, and then ask questions in an unfiltered way, as if a child would ask those questions, such as, "Are you thinking that many of your people are going to die?" It's a very serious conversation, and he introduces the audience to this conversation, including kids that might be watching the movie. And believe me, it's for kids, but there's a reason why this movie's PG. There's a lot of serious stuff in here, including killing. And in the Battle of Naboo, when it's the Gungan army versus the Trade Federation droid army, it's a pretty cool looking battle. It's definitely rated G overall, but if you look at it, you will see. And of course, Jar Jar's he's there for the laughs, of course, but he's inflicting damage on the droid army. And in George's world here in Star Wars, droids always stand in for human beings. So come on, all of this is allegorical and illustrative and metaphorical and analogous to our world in which we live, only it's set in a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago. But basically it's our world today. But you have to read all of this in the stories. It's much like the Tolkien work or the C.S. Lewis work with The Lord of the Rings with Tolkien and the Chronicles of Narnia with C.S. Lewis. And then, of course, you have the Star Wars complete saga, episodes 1 through 6. And then that is according to the creator, George Lucas. And then that world is illustrative of his philosophy in many ways of what is going on in our world today. So at the end, there's a lot of dead Gungans and there's a lot of dead droids. So yes, a lot of Gungans died in that battle. And a lot of droids died. And these droids stand in for people. And George is demonstrating this to us and showing us this. People die in a war. It's a serious war. But in this case, they had to have this battle as a diversion so that Queen Amidala's group could get to the throne room and capture the Viceroy, who's the head of the greedy Trade Federation, in which case they would have victory because they could overcome the droid control ship. So, all of this is going on. And then Jar Jar, but before this can happen, before the group can come together and defeat the droid army and capture the Viceroy. Oh, and if you didn't know that, it's a spoiler. And then Obi-Wan, of course, ends up taking on the role of training Anakin. We see this at the very end. But Jar Jar brings the Gungans and the people of Naboo that live on the surface and the Gungan race that live under the surface of Naboo. He brings them together so that they are able to form this alliance and have peace at the end of the story. At the beginning of the movie, its turmoil has engulfed the Galactic Republic. It's all about politics, trade routes and disputes over trade routes and all this stuff. But the very end of the movie, the final line of the movie is peace, as the Gungan race and the human race come together. Or the people that live on the surface of Naboo, the humans, and the Gungan race, the amphibians that live under the surface in the water, they come together, and the final word is peace. The first word, turmoil. The final word, peace. It is literally war and peace. And Jar Jar is literally the key to this whole thing. In every sense of the word. Not only in the sense of the word of being the key as a character, but also a sense of the word as to providing the audience with a frame of reference as to what is going on, what might happen, and what might the consequences be for what is happening. For all ages. Definitely rated PG. Requires adult supervision. Absolutely, for kids, I would say under the age of 10. Now, of course, we see at the end, Jar Jar is on the stage with everyone, slapping Captain Tarpus on the back. They're buddies now. Maybe Captain Tarpus doesn't like it, but Jar Jar does. He went from being the outcast, the clumsy, annoying character that nobody wanted, that everybody said didn't belong, that everybody kicked out, that everybody said was causing problems, that was getting into trouble. He's now the one that brought everybody together, and he's on the stage, the final platform, declaring peace and celebrating victory. Good over evil. And that's how Jar Jar's the key. Jar Jar's there for every person that was never included or kicked out, marginalized, outcast, told there was something wrong with them. Hey, it takes one to know one. And Jar Jar is the key for people like me and possibly people like you. And you were always told, get out of here. You're in the way. You almost got us killed. Are you brainless? And then, no matter what you do, you're getting us into trouble. Don't touch anything. Don't do that again. No wonder Jar Jar acts the way he acts. Yeah? How would you feel if your whole life you're told, don't touch anything? Well, that's what we get from Jar Jar. We don't know how old Jar Jar is, but he seems to be a young person. And he also seems to be a good character. I use the term person. But he's a character in this story, in this movie. He's a Gungan. He's an orange amphibian. He's not a Jamaican. And it's just really a great character. And it's really well portrayed. Amazing portrayal by Ahmed Best. Oscar worthy in my opinion. So, Jar Jar is the key to this whole thing. We've seen the hero's journey with Luke Skywalker. We've seen now the hero's journey with Obi-Wan Kenobi in many ways over episodes 1 through 3. And we did see the hero's journey with Anakin Skywalker in episodes 1 through 3 and then 4, 5, and 6. But we saw them in reverse. If you were born when I was born and you saw them as when I did. Star Wars in theaters in 1977. And then I believe The Empire Strikes Back in 1980. And I think The Return of the Jedi in 1982, I believe. I've got to get those dates straight. But then I saw the prequels in 1999. Phantom Menace is my favorite of all the Star Wars movies. And Jar Jar is the key to this whole thing. And he is the funniest character we've ever had. And his character arc, his hero's journey is, he goes from being the outcast that nobody wants to being the hero, one of the heroes, and the hero that brings everybody together. So, if you're into that sort of thing, then Jar Jar is for you. If you're not into that sort of thing, no, you're not going to like Jar Jar. He's just annoying and jarring. But he's a good character. He's a good-hearted character. He wants to help. But, like most normal people, he gets scared. And at one point, even in The Phantom Menace, he says, I think maybe we should be going back now. He's not supposed to be the all-courageous warrior Gungan. But we do see him perform his duty, much as I have said, in the style of Gilligan, as Gilligan would have on Gilligan's Island, in the battle on Naboo, where the Gungan battle the Trade Federation droid army. And we do see a lot of Gungans are killed, and a lot of droids are destroyed, which represents in this world people. George is showing us what happens when people go to war. But, of course, we have the rated G version in this sense, because it's not about gore and it's not about visually showing carnage. It's about telling a story of good versus evil, and about characters that are becoming friends and how they become friends, and how people overcome differences between societies, personalities, cultures, and even overcome their own ignorance and fear to become friends with someone they've never met before, form alliances, and overcome evil with good. And that's how I see The Phantom Menace, and that's why Jar Jar is the key to this whole thing. So, now, dear friends, that's all the time we have for today. Remember, your focus determines your reality. And may the Force be with us.